Hello everyone, Father Lamb here. It's Wednesday again, Wednesday, October 11th. And today is the feast of Pope John the 23rd, or Saint Pope John the 23rd. You know, I mentioned last week in passing in a homily, if any of you were there might remember, that John the 23rd, his pontificate was right around the time he opened up the Second Vatican Council back in the mid 1960s, started in the early 60s. And of course, being in charge of the entire church, the pressure that's put on anyone like that is hard. And that story is about him getting ready to go to bed one night, and he just said to God, "God, this is your church. You take care of it. I'm going to bed. Good night." And I love that. But for me, it doesn't always work. I'm not sure about for yourself. God, these two churches, BVM and Queenship, are your churches. You take care of them. I'm going to bed. Then I still can't sleep. And you look at that and you go, why? Why still? What's going on there? And part of it, I think, is I don't totally trust God. And I don't think I'm the only person that's struggling with that. I think that's one of the greatest struggles in the spiritual life, is to truly trust God. We're okay trusting God as long as we're in control, right? Like I often joke, I don't mind doing God's will, it's no problem, as long as it's the same as my will. But when the two are different, that's when we have a problem, And what does that mean to trust God, to be willing to give our lives over to Him, to really want to do His will? What's the fear that's behind that keeps us from totally turning our lives over to God, And the fear might be what's going to be left of me? Or what's God going to ask of me? Is it going to be too hard? Is He going to ask me to carry a cross that's just too unbearable, you see? And it really ties in with our concept of God, of how loving do we really believe God is. Because if we really believe God is loving and He wants what's absolutely best for us, then His will is what's best for us, even if it involves some kind of struggle. A friend of mine and I were talking about this, we talk about surrendering to God, or use other words like letting go, handing it over to God. There's a lot of different ways we express that, letting go and whatnot. I remember when he talked about it, he said to me, surrendering to Him was like going like this. If someone come up and put a gun to your head and said, "Okay, give me your money, you surrender to me," and surrendering, you would show them your hands. Oh, I surrender. See, if you take this in a spiritual way, surrender is a way of opening ourselves up to God. Because too often in our relationship with God, we're trying to take control, right? Now, control is a good thing if you're in the business world. You're trying to run a business or get things done. It's about control. Let's get this done. Let's go, see? In the spiritual life, that doesn't work. It only works to a point. But at a certain point in the spiritual life, we need to let go. We need to surrender. We need to give it over to God. And very often in our relationship with God, we sort of surrender and then we sort of take it back later. Lord, let's say you're struggling in a relationship with a friend. Lord, I just surrendered this relationship to you. But then a couple hours later, you're taking it back. And that's what they mean when you say you're white knuckling it. So your knuckles get white because you're just like, come on, let's just get this done. But in a spiritual life, letting go, surrender, giving it up, is putting it into God's loving hands and just getting out of the way and just letting it kind of happen, if you will. It's kind of like the difference if you were thrown into a body of water and you just start swimming like crazy, and you'll do okay for a while, but then you're going to get really tired and you may drown. As opposed to being thrown in a body of water and surrendering, falling back and just floating and trusting where the river or the body of water is going to take you. Trusting wherever God's going to take us, it's going to be okay. I mentioned recently, I've heard a lot of different definitions of prayer. Prayer is a lifting up of the mind and the heart to God. And there's a lot of different definitions of prayer. But recently I heard one from just an old-timer priest who said, prayer is simply giving God permission to love you. I'd like you to meditate on that maybe for the next couple of days. Prayer is simply permitting God to love you. Because sometimes even in our prayer, we're doing it. We're doing our prayer. We're saying our prayers. And it's good to say prayers, but we're in control and we're doing it, see? Well, what about giving control over to God, entering into His presence in prayer, and giving Him permission to love us? And that's really all of us want. We just want to be loved by God and by other people. And too often we make the struggle our We're doing this. I'm living a spiritual life. It's my doing. But as you grow in a spiritual life, more and more it's what God's doing in us if we just let him. But we're all too distracted, and we're all running constantly, and we're running from ourselves, we're running from God, we're running from life. Psalm 46, verse 10, be still and know that I am God. And if we would spend more time just being still, surrendering, opening up our arms and our hearts to God, then we can allow that love in, just giving God permission to love us. So sit in prayer this week and allow your prayers. Set aside some of the prayers you say all the time, or say them, but then find some time, 5 minutes, just to be still. And be mindful that God just wants to love us. And sin is putting blocks up to that. Well, you can't love me, God. I'm too terrible. I'm too sinful. We just don't feel good about ourselves on a certain day. And so that wall's up there. Let that wall come down. Open it up. And allow the love of God in your heart in a deeper way. Prayer is simply giving God permission to love us. And once we give him permission to love us, then we can trust him that whatever's going to happen in our lives is going to be okay because it is in God's hands. And that's not a bad place to be. God bless you.